Jeffrey Epstein. We know so much about this guy. From his days in Palm Springs, where he coerced hundreds of underage girls into sex trafficking, and to his first incarceration in 2008, we know that upon his release, he continued to brutalize more girls up to his second and final time being incarcerated in 2019. If there is one hole left in the Jeffrey Epstein story, it is what happened on his infamous private jet, the Lolita Express. This was no normal private jet. Epstein had a Boeing 727 converted for private use, so he could have plenty of space for him and all of his friends to party in the air. Epstein's jet had a total of at least 1,914 flights between the years 1995 to 2019. And keep in mind, a standard 727 jet could transport up to 189 passengers, so Epstein was able to bring along plenty of friends and victims on every flight. Unfortunately, even with the flight logs from the Lolita Express released to the public, we may never know who all of the victims were, because for some of the girls, rather than putting their names on the flight logs, nothing more than their gender and initials were written down. For those victims whose names were written down, we get first-hand account of what took place on Epstein's plane for nearly 25 years. In this episode, we will also get details from the pilots and the crew. I'm also going to go through the list of individuals who flew on Epstein's jet the most. I will start with those who flew a few times, and I will work up to the most frequent flyers aboard the Lolita Express. Starting the list off is a surprising Bill Gates. Having only taken one flight to Palm Springs, it would seem Gates and Epstein did not have much of a friendship. It appears that Gates was likely trying to court Epstein into helping fund his organization, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Gates visited Epstein at his New York townhome on several occasions starting in 2011, and had contact for a handful of years. But after a few years and no donation from Epstein, Gates decided to end that relationship. Interestingly, Gates reportedly was only on Epstein's plane by mistake, thinking it was his own $40 million private jet, according to a Gates representative. Another single flyer was Tom Pritzker, who is one of the 11 billionaire heirs of the Pritzker family, which owns the Hyatt hotel chain and Royal Caribbean Cruise Company. Tom Pritzker flew in the Lolita Express in 2000, and Virginia Giuffre reported she was instructed to have sex with him. Next, we run into another single flyer and the first politician on the list, ANDRÉS Pastrana, who was the former president of Colombia. The Lolita Express logs show Pastrana flew from Venezuela to Nassau, near where Epstein's island is located. The last of the single flyers on this list is another politician and perhaps one of the biggest names on the entire list. Donald Trump's connections to Epstein have been apparent now for some time. They knew each other fairly well for a few years, and then they had a falling out and ceased having contact, according to Trump. While he only flew on Epstein's jet one time, according to flight logs, he was listed as sexually assaulting an underage girl in a civil case that was settled out of court, and he admitted to knowing Epstein enough to say this about Epstein. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. It was also Trump's Mar-a-Lago club where Virginia Giuffre was recruited by Epstein to become a part of an international sex trafficking ring. With 4 flights each, the next on the list are supermodel Naomi Campbell and Prince Andrew. Naomi Campbell has come out to say she had no idea what Epstein was doing. Likewise, Prince Andrew claims to have no idea that Epstein was abusing and trafficking underage girls. However, Virginia Giuffre claims that not only did Prince Andrew have sex with her when she was a minor, but Naomi Campbell knew that Virginia was being abused and did nothing to help. Supporting Giuffre's claim is a former pilot of Epstein's, David Rogers, who gave a court testimony saying that there was at least one trip where he saw Epstein, Prince Andrew, and the then 17-year-old Virginia heading to the U.S. Virgin Islands together. Now, we start to see the odd connections Epstein had with Harvard. Larry Summers is an economist from Harvard, where he was also awarded President Emeritus. He was also the Treasury Secretary during Clinton's administration, and the economic advisor of President Obama. He was on the Lolita Express for 5 flights. Coming in with 9 flights is architect Ed Tuttle, who helped design the Amman hotels in Asia and elsewhere. Tuttle is also responsible for the design of Epstein's home on his private island, Little St. James. In early 2020, Tuttle died at the age of 75, and in a very Epstein-like twist, the cause of his death has not yet been released. Now we see Epstein's connections with Hollywood, as Chris Tucker and Kevin Spacey each flew for a total of 11 times. However, it appears that all of these flights were taken as part of an effort to visit Africa to raise awareness and work against HIV/AIDS at numerous sites in Africa. And while They were on the plane for 11 times. The flight attendant who was on those flights claims that these guys did nothing illicit on any of the flights. Keeping the Harvard connection going, and perhaps Epstein's strongest connection to the organization, is Alan Dershowitz, who was a law professor at the school and Epstein's personal attorney. Dershowitz flew on the Lolita Express 12 times, and many times Virginia Giuffre has claimed that Dershowitz sexually assaulted her when she was only 17 years old. Keeping his political connections going, Epstein and GWEDOLYN BECK, who ran for the U.S. House of Representatives back in 2014, was on the Lolita Express for 15 flights in 1999 to 2001. Next on the list is Jean-Luc Brunel. And if you're like me, you've never heard of this guy until now. But he was a prominent modeling scout. He would use his modeling company to get the girls visas so he could traffic them easier with legal visas. And past models have claimed that Jean-Luc drugged and raped them. He used the Lolita Express 16 times according to flight logs. Incredibly, the next person on the list is the second president of the United States we find on Epstein's flight logs. Bill Clinton flew on the Lolita Express at least 26 times between 2001 and 2003. It does appear that 11 of those flights were a part of the effort to visit Africa to raise awareness and work against HIV/AIDS at numerous sites in Africa with Kevin Spacey and Chris Tucker. I am not sure what took place on all the flights, but on the flights to Africa, Epstein's flight attendant, Shanti Davies, says that Bill Clinton was a complete gentleman the entire trip. Now that still leaves more than a dozen flights where anything could have happened. Now we get into some pretty big numbers with Emmy Taylor, who was a British musician and actress who is believed to have flown the Lolita Express a staggering 190 times. Taylor was on the plane so much for a reason, though, as she was allegedly the one helping Ghislaine Maxwell with organizing Epstein's sexual assaults with underage girls. Next up is Sarah Kellen, with 350 flights. She is the next most frequent flyer, but still not the one who has the most on the Lolita Express. Kellen has been described by Epstein's victims as being Maxwell's assistant, because she kept names and numbers of the girls who gave Epstein his massages and occasionally showed the girls what to do on the massage tables and would coach them. And finally, completing the list and being the most frequent flyer besides Epstein himself is unsurprisingly Ghislaine Maxwell with 520 trips. At this point, I feel like the whole world knows who Ghislaine Maxwell is, but if you want to know better what she was likely doing on her more than 500 flights, I would recommend checking out my past videos on her that are available with this link, or check out the Epstein playlist on this channel to get even more info on Epstein's #1 co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell. I want to make a point here to mention that the 3 people who flew on Epstein's plane the most were women. They were not women who were being abused. Instead, they were women who were helping to lure, coerce, and groom underage girls into having sex with men who were willing to victimize them. This is just one example, but it is an important lesson that a trafficker doesn't have to be a male, and the process of getting these girls to become victims involves a serious amount of manipulation and finessing by adults actively targeting vulnerabilities. Now that we have made it through the flight logs, I want to wrap things up by giving an account of things from the pilot's perspective. There were at least 5 pilots that rotated flying for the Lolita Express. One pilot, David Rogers, testified that he flew Virginia Giuffre 23 times on the Lolita Express. He also confirmed that Prince Andrew boarded the same flight as Giuffre. This helps to add credit to her many claims of abuse from Prince Andrew, Alan Dershowitz, and more. Now, Larry Visocki was known for taking pictures with the Lolita Express and showing off Epstein's aircraft. Larry Morrison said in a 2009 during a deposition that he didn't think any of the girls who boarded the flight looked extremely young. He also said he wasn't aware of who Ghislaine Maxwell was until he found a book about her family. So we're supposed to believe that hundreds of flights and girls that were clearly on the younger side, and he never noticed anything. Seems like to me Larry's a little out of touch with reality. Another pilot, Bill Hammond, is the only pilot who hasn't been asked for a deposition against Jeffrey Epstein. So at this point, I'm not sure what his insights are about the Lolita Express, but he may end up being brought into Ghislaine Maxwell's trial and provide a clearer picture of life on Epstein's plane. And the last pilot is Nadia Maracinko, who was known for a time as the Gulfstream Girl. In an incredible account, one of Epstein's victims claimed in written testimony that Epstein told He had bought Nadia when she was only 15 years old. Yes, I said bought her from her family and turned her into Epstein's sex slave. This same victim also stated that Nadia had sex with other victims by using sex toys. And by 2008, though, Nadia ended up being considered another victim of Jeffrey Epstein's and was granted immunity. That completes the breakdown of the Lolita Express flight logs and looking at who flew on the plane and what was taking place when different people were flying. The list today was not exhaustive, as there are more than 130 people who have been recorded in the flight logs. What this list does show is the range and depth of Epstein's influence. From multiple presidents of the United States to royalty, Epstein had such a vast network, it's almost unbelievable that he was ever stopped. Thanks for listening, and if you're not yet, make sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube at Human Trafficking Hater.